The Women of Ill Repute, with your hosts, Wendy Mesley and Maureen Holloway.
Hey, Maureen, is there anything that you won't talk about?
Anything I won't talk about? That's an interesting question. I'm not sure. First of all, if I tell you, then I'm talking about it, right?
Yeah.
Secondly, no, I don't think there is. And third of all, the two most awkward and personal topics would be how much money do I make or have and how often do I have sex? And the answer to both would be not quite enough, right? How about you?
Well, I mean, I have sex all the time, nonstop. I just finished.
I don't know how you find time to do this podcast, given the amount of sex that you're having.
Yeah, but I'm not paid for it. So, I got I got to work on that. Well, like you, I could use more of both.
Okay, well, let's bring this around to comedy, because I think the best comedians, stand-up comedians anyway, will talk about the things that make people uncomfortable. I just watched Ricky Gervais' special, and he's the master of going to uncomfortable places and somehow finding his way out the other end. Or Sarah Silverman, or like him or not, Dave Chappelle goes there, and they find something that makes us all squirm a little bit, and they just go there.
Yeah, Dave Chappelle, boy, oh boy, he just did this thing on SNL where he basically said, I'm not going to do this anymore. I hate you all. But he said that before. He seems to be preoccupied with dealing with issues and then getting shit for it and then complaining about the shit. But he's funny. He's very funny. Anyway.
He is funny. He's funny. And a lot of people think what he says is true, whether you agree with it or not. He apparently speaks the truth to somebody.
Yeah, well, the truth, that's a big deal. It's kind of a complicated thing. The idea is that the truth will set you free. Hopefully it'll make you laugh, but it's can also be offensive. It also involves taking risks, right? The truth is different things to different people.
But comedy is offensive. It's often offensive. It should be. Marshall McLuhan, the great Canadian media philosopher, said all jokes are grievances. There's pain behind every joke. We tell jokes to release and communicate grievances.
That's really funny, Maureen.
Shut up.
So I got one. I can add to that. Billy Wilder, the famous director, said, if you're going to tell people the truth, be funny or they'll kill you. So that's cheery.
Yeah, well, it's a good thing that Aisha Brown is funny. Aisha Brown is our guest this week, and she's the first Black woman ever.
Surely not.
She's the first Black woman to tape a comedy special for Crave Television, which was back in 2020. And I've told you not to call me Shirley.
An old joke. But anyway, Aisha, she's a little younger than both Shirleys. She's written, performed on Baroness von Sketch, as well as the Beaverton, This Hour's 22 Minutes. All of these standards, really great.
Yeah, and she's considered one of the top 3 Aishas in Canadian comedy.
There are 3. There are actually, there's probably more than 3, but there's only one.
Today, there's only one, and we welcome Aisha Brown. Hello, Aisha.
Hi, Aisha. How are you?
Hello. Oh, my gosh, you're both fantastic. I'm good. I'm doing good. I'm getting over a little cold, so I'm sorry if I'm a bit congested sounding. I'm usually much sexier, my voice.
Oh, really? So you can't do sexy? There's no...
No, there's no phone operator who wants this today.
When we were doing the sound check, you said you never have breakfast. So this is you without breakfast. Not bad.
Oh, well, thank you. I'm good hungry.
Well, tell us, we watched your Crave special last night, and that was done 2 years ago, right? Or more. It was pre-pandemic.
It was actually done 3 years ago. Yeah, in 2019, summer of 2019, which feels like a lifetime ago. I feel very different than that person who taped that special.
Yeah, well, we were wondering about you because we went online and, there's all kinds of jokes in the special and then there's all kinds of information about you. But where do you live now? Are you a writer now? Are you still performing? Are you still with the white guy? Do you, all that? So, tell us all the stuff.
Well, no, he moved on to other pastures. I don't know where he is.
Sounds like a special.
Maybe a sad documentary, but yeah, I guess life just kind of changed a lot. I don't really love social media. Never have. I think I did make a joke about it in the special, but yeah, I can't stand social media. So once the pandemic hit and people locked down and it almost became less expected of me as a comedian. I just stopped doing it. There's a lot of things I stopped doing. I stopped performing and stuck mostly to writing. I write mainly for TV now. And I do, in the back corners of my mind, when I miss it, I'll probably go back to stand up, but I don't miss it yet. I do enjoy writing for other people and making them wear, I guess, the jokes. It's kind of fun. It's kind of fun to sign checks off of other people's backs.
It's interesting that you say you prefer writing. And do you think you're as dangerous, maybe that's not the right word, but risky with other people as you are writing for yourself? Because you do take a lot of risks yourself.
Yeah, I'm actually not. I'm more careful when I write for other people. Like lately, I've been writing for This Hour's 22 Minutes. Lovely cast. And not only would I never put anyone in harm's way on that show, but I also don't think they'd let me. I couldn't get away with the content of a stand-up special on This Hour's 22 Minutes. It's a different audience, but they're universally linked in that they like to laugh. So it's a different type of punchline. But yeah, I think, I guess that every job has a different requirement. Like I've written for Roast Battle Canada, which is also a very different show. And for that show, the punchlines I write, I would never say myself. So it really, I don't know, being a writer, you become a little bit of a chameleon where you're just kind of trying to, it feels a bit like a puzzle where you're trying to figure out what is the piece that's going to fit this particular audience.
Well, we kind of miss your voice because there was a very strong voice in the special. There was a lot of anger about racism and also about the boyfriend who dumped you. And I guess now it sounds like there's a new one and
a whole new special.
Yes, there's another special there.
I miss that girl too. She was so thin. She had great skin. But it's interesting. I think that comedy before 2020 was lighter. Even though I was talking about race, it wasn't the same. It's hard to make something funny when it makes you angry, at least for me. There's some people who can do it very well. They could tap into that anger, or maybe their voice is that anger. For me, it needs to get to a place of passive aggressiveness in order for me to make it funny, because I don't think I'm likable when I'm angry. I think I need to get to a place where I can be a little bit shitty, but adorable, but shitty. And maybe that's the curse of being a woman sometimes, is that when we come across as angry, we get a label, or we're not seen as funny when we're angry. A lot of people have told me that on stage, I do a lot of misdirect. Like I have a tone of voice where I sound like I'm going to be really pleasant, but I say something horrifying. And I think that's true of every woman in my life is someone who I find funny because they are so shady, or they're saying something in a way. I've never worked with a woman, whether it be an office setting or in entertainment, where they haven't had to package what they're saying in a way where it's more pleasant than what it really is. And I've done this in emails too, where I've sent emails with smiley faces and I am not smiling, just so people don't think I'm mad. And so if there's a way to say what I'm angry about now, where I don't sound so angry and I can package it in a way where it's humorous and it makes people laugh, that's when I'll kind of return and say it.
So interesting though, because the fact that women are still having to deal with appearing to be angry is one tangent. We can talk about that forever. But the idea, like I find that anger in humor, I find it makes my skin crawl, but it's fascinating and it does make me laugh. And I miss that. I mean, I want to hear other people's anger, but you're saying that a lot of people don't want to hear that. And it's safer for you where you are, I guess, writing.
Well, for me, at least for my voice, there are people who can, I don't know if you've ever watched Toto Hersey, who I wouldn't actually call angry, but she's a Canadian comedian who is Black and Muslim and wears a hijab and I think currently lives in New York. And Hodo says a lot of things that make people uncomfortable. She pushes the bar further than I ever have, I feel. But her punchlines are solid and she delivers on it. And I guess it's just about a comfort level thing. Like in my life, I don't know how many people have seen me angry, because I think I'm now 42. And I remember being socialized in a way where be pleasant. Women are supposed to be pleasant. And that's something I've clearly fought against. Even with my stand-up, I've pushed beyond the pleasantness of my upbringing, but it's still in there. It's still ingrained in me where I do feel the need to deliver a message in a way that's more pleasant than what it really is.
I think that's a universal concern for female comedians, that you can't get beyond the being nice thing.
Yeah, it's tough. Although this younger generation, oh my God, I've turned into my dad.
People our age.
The kids these days.
The kids nowadays. I do think that as much as I hate using social media, I see the kids on TikTok. The positive I'm seeing is that girls and women on TikTok are expressive in ways I never would have felt I could be. And that is actually heartwarming to me. I like that. I like that women are not biting their tongue as much.
And yet I'll tell you, Wendy and I are a generation past you, but so we have kids in their 20s, so we're exposed to their disdain and scorn on a regular basis. But I find, and I don't know whether Wendy will agree, but not so much my kids, but maybe they and their friends are more conservative in a lot of ways, that they've been taught, especially recently, to be way more careful with their words, their pronouns, their assumptions. I'm not saying that's a bad thing, but I find that I'm the one that's constantly being told, Mom, you can't say that. And not because I'm being insensitive, but just because, you're not allowed to say these things anymore.
They have an advantage. I do feel like, because the one thing I can't stand on social media is how quick how much everybody loves to gotcha everyone. And so there is a thing where when I was a kid and I had a question I asked my dad, he would tell me to look it up, knowing full and well there was no internet. And I'd have to go to these dusty encyclopedias, and these answers were written in 1967. And so, there was no easy answer. You couldn't, that whole educate yourself thing that people do like to say on social media, I think it only can go so far. And they have an opposite problem. Whereas when, my dad would tell me to look it up when I was a kid, and I'd look and there was one answer. Now, when you tell someone, go educate yourself, look it up, there's a million answers, and about 80% of them are wrong. They're the wrong answer, or they're alternate answers. And so I think that the need to, I don't know, not shame. Well, yeah, I do think that there is an over-shaming happening on social media where people don't feel the need to make mistakes. And I do suffer from perfectionism, and not in that lie of a job interview way where you say, I'm a perfectionist. I do everything perfectly.
What's wrong with you? Well, I'm a perfectionist.
I just can't make a mistake. No, I'm a perfectionist in the way where it paralyzes me. And so something like social media where your words are so permanent, I reject that. I reject pictures lasting forever. I mean, talk to Justin Trudeau about the hilarity of a joke forever. There are things that, jokes especially, do not age well. And as a comedian, that's a thing that I started a lot later in life than I think most of my peers, the people I was doing shows with. And so it's something that I appreciated immediately and thought, I don't like the permanency. I don't think that when you say something on social media, it should be representative of your worldview for the rest of your life, or that you should have to apologize for it forever. There's no grace. Nobody's giving anybody any grace. And I mean, I'm saying this broadly. There's obviously people who don't really deserve grace because they have a pattern of acting terribly. Personally, I think that, the younger generation is more careful, but they're also more judgmental. No offense to your children, though. I'm sure they're lovely.
They are judgy. They're so judgy.
I have a daughter, and Maureen has a son the same age. And my daughter, she went through some anxiety and depression, and not things we can talk about that because I know you went through that too, or are going through that, and never really goes away. But there was a particular period where it was super difficult for her. And expressing herself on social media was very, very helpful, maybe like comedy in a way. But now she's 24 and she's quite left-wing in many ways, conservative in many, with small c conservative in the way of, don't say this, don't say that, do this, whatever. But she hates social media. And she used to be the meme queen of Montreal for Anglos. And now she's like, social media serves a purpose. And obviously, like, you can't have relationships, you can't communicate, you can't know what's happening in the world if you don't do something or read something on social media. It's changing the world that we live in. So I can't imagine. I mean, Maureen and we know that we need to be more active on social media all of the time about the podcast and stuff, but
hate it. It's a job, right?
Oh, this is our bond. We'll go to brunch together and we'll shit on social media together as a team. I think social media, there has to be a radical change with it because it is making us all sick. And if you have a job in the public eye, it makes your job more difficult in a way that is sometimes completely unfair and sometimes in ways that are fair. I mean, there is that expression, which is the sunlight is the best disinfectant, which I'm sure a scientist would disagree with somewhere. And it's actually a mixture of peroxide, baking soda, or whatever. But I clearly know nothing about chemicals. My dad's a chemist, and I'm pretty sure I just gave out the recipe for mustard gas or whatever. But yeah, I do think that social media has made some radical social changes that I'm really thankful for as a woman of color. But as a comedian, I'm like, oh my God, or just a woman of color, I also fear social media because I think, and you guys probably understand this too, as women, you get targeted and your words get parsed in ways that doesn't happen for men. You get scrutinized in a way, and then when you try to explain it, there's a million people just negging you. And I hate to use the word gaslighting because it's become the word of the year, but there is a bit of a gaslighting of when you say, I think I'm getting undue negative attention because of parts of my identity I can't control. And there's always a group of very angry people telling you like, oh, stop being a victim. Like, I'm not being a victim. I'm just observing a thing that's happening to me. I'm allowed to do that. So people just, no one's letting up on anyone, and it's exhausting. So taking breaks off social media is great. And you kind of realize that it's not real, a lot of it. A lot of it is manufactured, and that's why it's so toxic for us.
I'm so surprised that you use the cliche about sunshine. Don't you hate cliches?
I do. Well, I hate them, but I need them. It's funny. Cliches are the thing in comedy they tell you to steer clear from because they say, oh, you don't really want to say the thing that everyone's expecting. But as a comedian, cliches are a fun tool because when people are expecting you to veer left and you go right, it's a bit of an easy laugh. I'm giving you a behind-the-scenes magic about misdirection, and you don't really need it. It's pointless, but yes, I do love a cliche because it's my version of autopilot for verbal thinking.
The women of ill repute.
It was really weird. Maureen and I both had cancer. And one of the things that, you can blame everything on cancer.
That was weird.
Well, we had it at the same time. But the weird thing was that I couldn't access cliches. And I thought as a journalist, as a comedian, it's the same thing. You're trained never to use a cliche, but sometimes they come and use, and I couldn't for the life of me come up with a cliche. They never write about that in the cancer books about you don't have access to cliches.
My dad he still has prostate cancer. He was diagnosed in 2010, but it's crazy because you can't really tell by looking at him that anything's different. He's got great insurance. So he's been just fine for years and still my dad in many ways. But I feel like prostate cancer is also a different cancer than other types of cancer. It's very treatable and manageable. But his big thing was juice. He's Jamaican and people just sent him juice all the time. Just curative juices. And he bought into teas, just everything holistic. I mean, thank goodness he didn't just rely on the holistic medicines, but I feel like he really leaned into juice because that's what Jamaicans are known for is really good juice. And so, yeah, so many juices.
It's funny. It is. When I was going through chemo and I worked throughout, I was on the air working from home. This is back before this was 17 years ago. And I would make jokes about it. And some people found it offensive. And I was like, fuck you, it's my cancer.
Yeah.
But other people who had been through it, who had family members going through it, really loved the fact that, there's no point in having cancer if you can't joke about it. But a lot of things are like that. I mean, you talk about race, you talk about penis size, you talk about all these things that people are horrified by. But the fact that they're horrified by it gives you a way in to find the humor. And you do that. So I wonder, this was 3 years ago, your special. And it was before Black Lives Matters came. I mean, you were way ahead in a lot of ways. Would you be able to find the same humor now? I mean, I think I know the answer to this. You would, if you were to write a special now about you, Aisha Brown, the first Black woman for the second time. Where would you want to go? What would you want to explore the same topics in a different way?
So we're dying for you to do another special, in other words.
That's basically it. When are you doing another special?
You know what? Well, this is really appealing to the van. I needed this. Thank you. I've said this to other people before, is that my stand-up is very much what I would talk about with girlfriends or the few guy friends who I still have.
Is it the penis jokes?
You know, it's more than not doing stand-up. I know way less men now, but I still know some men. They're great. I'm just trying to avoid getting tweeted at. So I think that the subject matter might be similar, but I do feel like a way different person. Like I do feel differently about, well, currently now incredibly single, so single. But I also feel, I don't know. I don't think I would be as light as I was in 2019. I don't feel as light, both physically and mentally. I am a different sized person than I was then, and I feel changed. I don't know that a lot of people walked away from the pandemic and lockdown feeling like it's almost like we all had a coming of age moment. And so I don't know anyone who is able to feel the levity that they did before. But maybe that's also just being older too. Like I filmed that special and I was 39, and now, and even though 39 to 42 doesn't feel a lot older, if I were to be on a dating app, the 4 in place of the 3, it feels different. There's that. But then there's also just, I have these recurring shame waves of memory, you know, and you just think about things you said when you were 20 and you're like, oh my God, I can't believe I said that to that person. And that started when I was in my mid 30s and hasn't stopped, where I just become more and more regretful about words that I've said. So I do feel a little bit more serious. Like I don't know that I would stand by the exact same jokes that I had in my stand-up special. I mean, I don't feel that bad about them. I don't think I took any shots at anyone who was vulnerable, really.
Couple of ex-boyfriends, yeah, but...
Yeah, they're not going to come for me, though, because they don't want me to say it was them.
It's fictitious, right?
Sure. Yes, they were all alleged.
As were their bits, yes. Which were measured and explained, yes. And now you're single. Whoever would have predicted that? So that's why. Anyway, I was really struck, and I don't like to talk about this because this is not what this podcast is about, but I felt a certain amount of shame for using a word, because I used a word that you used a lot in your special, the N word.
That you have the right to use. Aisha does.
Yeah, but I didn't. And I was in a private phone call, and I was outraged that somebody said that she was called that, but I shouldn't have used it. And so, yeah, you deal with that shame. But I'm also now, that was 2 or 3 years ago, like your special was 2 or 3 years ago. I think I learned from it, and I thought I was being supportive, and I wasn't seen that way. So yeah, you need to listen more. You need to understand more. But I'm doing this podcast, and it's all about, I don't know, getting past shame and regret in a way, and trying to be a good person, being ashamed of the things you need to be ashamed of, but not spending your life in regret and shame, because what does that accomplish?
I mean, I started doing stand-up in, I think around when I was 34, I believe, 33, 34. And I always think about the fact that, thank goodness I didn't start when I was in my 20s, because I was reckless. And I also thank goodness that social media hasn't been around for the vast majority of my life, like not in the way that it is today. Twitter came out when, 2009 or 2011, one of those odd numbered years. And I was slow to the take with it and hesitant from it. But things like YouTube, Twitter, things that live on like that, I think about the fact that I was allowed to make mistakes, and I feel remorse, but I don't know that I would be able to grow as a human being if I had to continuously apologize and feel remorse. And the wound doesn't close when people won't let you get over a moment. And I was talking with my sister the other day. Actually, let me not drag her into this. She's a private person who doesn't need these problems. But When we were young, my mom put us into dance. And I remember doing a dance. I guess this was this was in the either late 80s, early 90s. And one of the costumes was a really reductive little indigenous girl costume. And hugely embarrassed. And I mean, I was a child. I bear no responsibility. And I will, to this day, I will shame the choreographer. No, I will not. But thank goodness the image of that dance picture isn't the thing that represents me today as a 42-year-old. I would think that I was given time to grow past that embarrassing leotard.
Just don't run for office.
Oh, trust me, I've buried that a long time ago.
Yeah. There should be a statute of limitations. You just brought back a memory that I hadn't even thought about, and I absolutely do not assume responsibility for this, but we had a Cowboys and Indians Day at camp when I was about 7, and my mother I was an Indian, as we called them then, and she made me, I was so small, she made me a dress out of a pillowcase, okay, so that's how small I was, with a fringe hemline and, a feather. And I marched down the street as a little Indian maiden. Oh my God, both of those words should not be used. And if anybody were to say to me, and I mean, even if I was 17 instead of 7, at that time, it was just, I was proud to have that costume. And if anybody were to hold that up.
Now, yeah, but we were lucky to live in ignorance, but it was also, all right, to be ignored. But ignorance is not an excuse. I think it's good that we're learning and paying attention to different things now.
I think it's great that we're more aware as a culture. I do think that, okay, somebody makes a mistake and you say, you've made a mistake and there's a consequence. That I'm all right with. What I'm not all right with is there does seem to be a malicious intent in going back very far into a person's past to dig up a wrongdoing or to beat something over the head. So like one action and then just make it that entire person's personality and identity. We are all a spectrum of things. Some of them great. And speaking from my own experience, some of them shameful and embarrassing. Like I think about 2020 hit and I had just moved in with the boyfriend of the special, and nothing accelerates a breakup more than moving in and seeing nothing else and no one else.
Makes it or breaks it. Yeah.
For several months. If he didn't find me annoying before, I ensured he did. But after that breakup, just a series of unfortunate events kept happening in my life where I was just put in positions where my mental health took a decline. And I would say this past winter, so January of 2022 till I'm going to go to about June, was the darkest period of my life where I sunk to a level of depression I had never sunk to before. And luckily clawed my way out of it. But if people could see me in that period of time where didn't leave my apartment and like working from home, not so much a blessing, a curse in that time, because if I had somewhere to be, I think it would have anchored me out of the darkness a little bit. But being able to Uber Eats and work from home, and I guess just all of it I could do from this one little box. But if people could see me in that light, I would hate for that to be representative of an entire life that wasn't all darkness. So I don't know. I do think we are living in a time where people are just not forgiving of themselves. And being on social media, it's like this reminder that you should be angry all the time. And I just don't think that's very healthy. I feel like the right people probably listen to this podcast. So I know I'm not preaching to a terrible choir of incels, or I don't know. Yeah, I just think we should all be nicer to ourselves at this point in time.
So are you okay now? Are you?
That is the sweetest "are you okay" I've heard in a while. That is so sweet. You know what? I'm doing so much better. I was in a bad place. When I think about where I was this time last year, I'm actually relieved I got out of it and that I made it out with some friends still and somehow still working, which I'm shocked.
So what are you doing? Are you writing now for people?
Yeah. I write for This Hour is 22 Minutes, and I wrote for Roast Battle Canada, and every now and then I'll work for a show that's in development that has no chance of ever getting made. And fun little things like that. I like to take meetings with the 2 networks that we have in this country and string them along about a show I might write one day or not. I'm out there. I was able to go to the Just for Laughs festival this summer, and I wrote for the galas that were happening there. So I feel like I have a lucky existence, and there have been situations that have buoyed me out of cold darkness.
Well, I'll tell you something. I don't know if it's any help, but something that somebody told me. And my God, I know a lot of comedians, and there's never more anxious, wretched group of people I've ever met in my life. The miserable, dark, prone to depression and addiction and anxiety and horrible.
Oh my God, we're miserable. What a delightful bunch. It's like inviting. It's if you found out all children's clowns were just all a part of the same support group for balloon phobics.
Yeah. But I'll tell you something somebody told me a long time ago when I was going through maybe my darkest period, and it had nothing to do with cancer or anything like that. It was just depression. It comes from all sorts of places, but you don't lose your talent. You don't. You may think that you do. You may not believe in yourself, but your talent doesn't disappear. It may be submerged or it may be, redirected, but it doesn't, you don't lose it. It will be there for you when you need it, if you trust in yourself. I thought it was really helpful because you think, oh my God, I'm doing something terrible to myself. Maybe you are, but your talent doesn't go away.
Well, there's that other layer of being a woman, again, where I do consider myself a feminist. And I do think, and I've said things and meant it to people where they said, oh, I'm fat, or I'm ugly now, or I'm old, whatever. And I've said, nobody sees you in this negative shade that you see yourself in. No one's looking at that extra few pounds or seeing the extra crease you now have in your forehead or whatever. They're not looking at the one flaw that you've zeroed in on that you think makes up your entire being. But I don't feel that way about myself. So it's weird to be able to look at people and see that they're consumed. I guess the vanity of being a woman in the public eye, it's a difficult one to escape because I don't think when a woman is insulted, they do go right for our physical appearance. And, even if it's Angela Merkel, she's an incredibly accomplished woman, very bright science person that I'm sure my dad would appreciate. But that's a woman who people, when they want to insult her, they go for her haircut. Wild. That's wild to me. And there is a level of wanting to be seen as a woman sometimes, because wanting to be seen means facing scrutiny that's sometimes just so personal and hurtful.
Well, I'm going to add, you said the word crow's feet is like, why do they call it crow's feet? It's so unfair. So I've been because going through cancer and everything was the hysterectomy, the euphorectomy, is all of these words that are they're so wrong, basically. And then you said crow's feet, so I'm going to add that one to the list.
Yeah, we need to rebrand it. Wisdom lines.
Aisha, I'm going to ask you, and if you can't, I don't want you to feel bad about it, but can you still do the splits?
I will tell you this. I haven't tried it, but I'm going to just based on I had to go to a physiotherapist because I was sitting wrong and my shoulder started to hurt. So I'm going to say no based on that.
It doesn't involve your shoulders.
I think that my joints and my muscles have basically said, grow up, stop this. But you know what? Maybe I'll do a yoga class, try to limber up for a comedy comeback because people want this. Actually, funny about that was so for that special, that joke, I always do the splits. And I hadn't done a dress rehearsal until the morning of the show. And the stage was made of the same rubber that the bottom of my shoes were made of. And so when I tried in dress rehearsal to slide into the splits, I just stopped short and I was in a panic. I'm calling my sister. I'm like, people are going to expect the splits. She's like, do you think you're Simone Biles? Nobody wants the splits from you, fool. Just do the joke. If you just get onto the floor and do something splits no one's going to be disappointed. There's no judges in the audience with giving you a 10 or a 9. So I had to alter how I got into that joke, but it was a real moment of panic. And then I realized I wasn't a top athlete.
You are a perfectionist. You really are. Because I don't think anybody came to see you that night to do the splits.
Nobody even came to see. They were just there because they probably heard that Tiffany Haddish was around the corner. They're like, well, I guess I'll see this Canadian Black girl for about a minute. Every Canadian comic deals with the same humbling at JFL of no one is here for me, but they might tolerate me.
You never know.
Well, that's how I saw Trevor Noah. I saw him at Just for Laughs a bazillion years ago before he did the big show. So, you never know. Or you can just keep writing and have a life. But we miss you. And if you could just let us know which ones are your lines in the Beaverton or in the 22 minutes or whatever, then we can follow you that way.
You guys are very positive. I did write a parody of Baby It's Cold Outside with the help of Jordan Foisey and Abba Amakwando. We teamed our comedy brains together. It's about inflation. It was called It's Cold Inside. It's very 22 minutes. But you know what? ABBA and Chris performed it beautifully. And so, yes, the next time I coin another Canadian classic like that, I'm sending it to you both directly. Remember that you said this.
You let us know. I really hope that you have another special, though. I'd like to see you do. I mean, it's up to you. Who gives a shit what I think? But I think it would be wonderful for everybody.
No, this is actually very motivating.
Listen, Aisha, it's been a huge pleasure talking to you. It's been very moving. And we wish you, I speak for Wendy, rarely, but, we wish you all the best. You're hugely talented and hugely smart and beautiful and brave. So,
Oh, my God. Can we do this like every week? I will pay you.
You'd be the first.
Well, you're both lovely. And I listened to your Alison Dorr episode, too. And
oh, yeah, she's great.
She's wonderful. You guys are doing a great thing. I love hearing Canadian women just talking, and we need more of that.
Yeah, well, the idea was like Maureen and I are very similar, but very different because she's a comedian and I used to be a very serious journalist. So, but somehow we get to meet really interesting people because I don't know anything about comedy, but I love it. And I love the fact that you're so brave and that you've taken risks and now you're looking after yourself. So you have to do both. But we're just so happy that you came on and it's been lovely to meet you. So we'll see you next week. We'll call.
See you next week. Thanks a lot, Aisha.
Thanks, Aisha. Thank you.
Okay, perfect. Same time. Thank you for having me.
I found her very moving. Like the funny is there, but so is the pain and so is making an effort of your life. And where's the line? Anyway, it was just she's just so interesting. So lovely.
Watching her, I mean, I knew she wrote for Baroness at this hour. But watching her special, I thought, oh my God, she's so cocky and sure. That's a weird word, eh? Cocky, especially used for a woman. But so brazen and fearless and sharp. And then you meet the person and she's absolutely brilliant and funny and smart, but so vulnerable.
Yeah, and so thoughtful. I mean, I guess people, 60-year-olds make assumptions about 40-year-olds being very adept and very into social media. But I think like everybody, the world is changing and we all, we've all gotten past the idea when Facebook said it's all going to be great. We're all going to be communicating. Well, everybody will talk to everybody. And isn't that fat? Well, no, there's all kinds of downsides. And I think everybody realizes that. And it's had a real impact on her. So yeah, there are risks to taking risks.
She was lovely. It's funny how the comedians are serious and then the serious people are hilarious.
I hope they mean to be.
Well, intentionally so. It is. It just goes to show you people are not what they expect. But for the most part, they are lovely and wonderful to talk to and hopefully to listen to.
Yeah, she's great on being the curse of being a woman, the curse of being a person of color, and also the curse of being someone who feels things. So we didn't even talk about ADD because I think somewhere on a YouTube I saw her talking about having ADD and that she can't focus on one thing for a long time. And then she suffers from depression and anxiety, which it seems like, like so many people.
They all go hand in hand.
Yeah. Anyway, it was lovely to talk to her. And I might have gotten a little sort of swept away because she talks so deeply about the N-word and taking risks and not blaming people for whatever.
Wendy, it was a good opportunity to have that conversation and the right person to talk to. And like she said, you know what? You can't be held accountable for all your mistakes in the past. And God knows you've been contrite. And I always want to jump in and explain that this was not your fault. But anyway, I'm glad that we got to hear this conversation. So
yeah, she was wonderful. So thank you so much. So we'll talk soon. Talk again.
Okay, bye.
The Women of Ill Repute with Wendy Mesley and Maureen Holloway. Available on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Google Podcasts, or at womenofillrepute.com.
Produced and distributed by the Sound Off Media Company.